Regardless of your position on podcasting's discoverability problem, you probably wouldn't mind it if it were easier for potential listeners to find your podcast, right? Me either. But would that come at a cost? Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Is there a downside to solving podcasting's discoverability problem? As podcasting consumption continues to rise, will there be negative consequences felt? And is that something serious podcasters like you should be concerned about, or at least be mindful of? Starting well before the Cambridge Analytica scandal, a slew of studies and reports investigated the detrimental side effects social media platforms, in fact all of social media, has on our lives. And if not our lives specifically, then the lives of hardcore social media users of the various platforms that are out there. And while not everyone agrees on the severity of the problem, very few people doubt that, yes, in fact, these platforms are engineered in ways that really aren't the best for our mental health. And if not your mental health, then the mental health of others who are, for whatever reason, more susceptible to those platforms. Now, so far, podcasting has escaped all of that. And I mean podcasting overall. Individual podcasts and podcasters and the people who fund those podcasters, and not so much. They've come under fire. But complaints about these podcasting personalities largely tend to focus around, look, I'm just going to speak plainly here, podcasters who act like assholes. Really, it's what it boils down to. They get dinged for being abusive. They get dinged for intentionally spreading misinformation. Rightly so, by the way. And it's rare, however, that gets directly tied back to the mental state of listeners overall, certainly those who are the focus of the abuse, clearly. But I don't think I've seen a study that looks at the correlation of mental health to hours spent consuming podcasts. I just haven't seen that. Maybe it exists. But that doesn't mean that podcasting is safe from that. And I'll tell you what I mean. The thing I think that podcasts are protected by, overall, from having this negative impact on our quality of life, I think it's the intentionality required to podcast, or to listen to podcasts specifically. Look, it takes work to find a podcast to listen to. There isn't a stream of podcast content that's being pushed at listeners whenever they're listening. Right? It's a one-to-one thing here. There isn't really a master algorithm that's deciding to who sees what content, right? And it's not been, this algorithm will be programmed by people who are there to, keep us listening. We don't have that. There isn't a financial incentive to get someone to get all their information and their entertainment from podcasting. Yet. But imagine if we solved podcasting's so-called discoverability problem. Instead of having to figure out what people wanted to listen to in a haphazard, unstructured way that lets word of mouth reign supreme, imagine a podcast app that knows your listening habits so well that several excellent, high-quality recommendations on what you should listen to next were available when you stopped listening to an episode. Great, right? What if your inbox or your listening queue were intelligent, pushing to the top the most important things for you to listen to from your queue right now, keeping in reserve those things that were less critical? That would be helpful. Or would it? And what if your listening app was so tuned into you and what you liked that it really became the primary tool that you use to consume not just podcasts, but also audio and, sure, why not other video content from a variety of sources? Sounds great. Or not. You see, that's the future that post-discoverability problem the world of a post-discoverability problem for podcasting. That's the world a lot of them see and are actively working towards, if not lobbying for all podcasting to go in that direction. That's a future where podcasters could, in fact, be lumped in with other anxiety-inducing and mental health damaging services that are currently under fire. Let me be clear about this. I don't think the world I just laid out is going to come to pass. Just like I don't think that podcasting really has a discoverability issue, at least not the way people talk about it. But not that I think everything is rosy and perfect in there. Yes, I do think by and large that podcast listening apps have a long ways to go in improving in-app discoverability. My hope is that when they do solve it, it's solved in a way that doesn't make us worse for the wear. And on that markedly unhappy note, sorry about that, I shall be back on Monday with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers!